Then I'll try to answer them.
But the only formality is an introduction. My name is Mike Dekema.
Okay.
Dekema. And we're in Corinth, Mississippi. Today is November 8th, 2013.
Okay.
And tell me your
My
full name.
Bobby Jean Ratliff. Okay.
Bobby, you understand that we're recording this now. I'm making a film.
Oh, okay.
And that's okay with you?
Yes, go ahead.
Were you born here?
Yes, in Alcorn County.
Okay.
November 27, 1940.
5 years to the day before I was born.
Oh, okay.
Tell me about your family. How far back do you trace your family?
Well, my dad came from Ripley. My mother came from a little area called Kasuth. It's kind of out southwest of here. And my mother was a Walker, the daughter of Lane Walker and Katie Walker. My father is from Ripley. He was related to the Coxes. His mother was a Cox and the father was a Ratliff. And as far back as I know that they was raised somewhere around the cotton plant area.
Down south of here?
South of Ripley, on Highway 15, I think, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Can you trace, or are there family stories going back to the Civil War and slavery time?
No, I can't go that far back now. When we learned about where my father was kind of raised around cotton plant was that he has a cousin that she's 85, I think, and she lives in Memphis, and we went to visit her. She's a couple of years ago, and she was telling us about this. Yeah.
Don't worry about it.
I'm gonna cut it off. I'm just cut it off.
Don't worry.
Sorry.
That's why we edit video, so
Well,
it'll go away.
Yeah, that's Sam.
And your parents, tell me about them. What did your father do? What did your parents do?
My father was a minister.
Okay.
Because he did, back at that time, he did finish 8th grade. And that was very rare, you know. But my mother had very little schooling. She probably got to maybe 4th, 5th grade, something of that nature.
Okay.
And don't know, I think she was either 23 years old when she married. I can remember she told us that. And I think she was about 3 years older than my dad. And so.
And were your dad a minister here? Yeah.
Well, no, he was living at the time, was in Tupelo. He was pastoring in the Tupelo area.
Okay.
My mother had passed in 76. And he was pastored all over the Tupelo area down there. And as a matter of fact, my father was killed. A neighbor of his, a son's neighbor of his, I don't know, my dad, he was always trying to help people. And I think in that sense, and maybe had let that young man have money and once upon a time. And knowing my dad, if he come back and tried to borrow more, he didn't let him have it. And he was hit from behind with a tie tube. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. How old were you?
He was 81.
How old were you at the time?
Right now?
No, when that happened?
That was in 92.
Okay.
Yeah, in 92.
Wow.
And yeah, that was fair to say. My dad was in very good health. I mean, he didn't get around like an old man, you know. He wasn't humped over or anything, and he was still pastoring a church in Tupelo called Red Oak Hill. Yeah.
And where did you go to school? Where did you go to school?
I went to school here I started school in Tennessee.
Okay.
Just across the line in the St. Rest guys area.
Okay.
And up until 1951, my father had a church, pastored a church in Oxford. And so we moved there, and I think a fall of 51 until 54, November 54. And we had a house, we have some in Tennessee. And it got burned down about 2 weeks before we were to move. And so therefore we had to move here in Corinth. And we moved back here in 54 November, and I started the school here at Eastham.
Okay.
Yeah, it was the first season that the school opened.
Okay.
Yeah, and I finished here 12th grade.
So you went through 12th grade here?
We went through 12th grade here.
Okay. Then where? What was next after school?
Well, things, back in that time was pretty hard, unless if you were in sports and your coach liked you. That's the only way you got a scholarship, because schools weren't integrated.
Sure.
And then your coach would point you to different places or talk to different coaches, and that's how you could maybe advance your education, but financially couldn't afford it. So my first job after school was at the Corinth High School as a janitor.
Okay.
Worked there for about 4 years. And during that time, the plants had started coming south, manufacturing. And so I was able to get on at Intex. At that time it came here, it was South Bridge.
Okay.
And then the name changed to W.R. Grace.
Okay.
Okay. And after that, it was Intex. And then from Intex to Mississippi Polymer, which it is now. It's still there.
What did you do for them?
Well, I started there, which back then you would only be hired in as a custodian.
Okay.
So I hired in there and worked as a custodian for maybe about 3 or 4 years. The union was voted in, and they had to put some blacks in production at the time.
Okay.
So I was one of the ones that was chosen. We went in and took a test. A friend of mine and myself, his name was Don Wallace. I went in 1 week and started on the mill. I was a mill operator when I first started.
Okay.
And he came in the next week as a wind-up operator. Worked third shift. Gave us a pretty rough time, but we've had a rough time most of our lives, so we fought through it. And after that, things mellowed down for us. He stayed on his job, but after a couple of years, I moved up then as a relief man. This is a person that he trained to relieve everybody on that machine.
Okay.
And that was the operator, wind-up, and Banbury at that time. And I got that job, and I worked it, I guess, for a couple of years. And then a calendar operator's job came open, because I was aggressive to do everything on the job.
Go back a moment to the union.
Okay.
How would you view their role as far as opening up jobs for blacks here in Mississippi?
I think it played a big role in it because it was unionized. And I think you had to hire a certain percent of blacks there.
By union contract?
Yes, by union contract. If you're going to be, you couldn't.
Okay.
They, I think, specified a certain amount that you had to hire in.
Okay.
So that was that. And from there, I proceeded to do all the jobs in that department, which was calendar department, yeah.
Okay.
And after that, I went into print. Wasn't too good at that because just before this, I think this was in '73, my wife and I, she was working with a man here in Corinth that had a packaged liquor store. It was called Howard Bunch. And he had a motel up on the state line.
Okay.
The one that was in the Buford Puzzle story.
Okay.
And so we were sitting around there one day, and I made the fact, said, oh boy, I'd like to have that place up there. And he said, well, yeah, you can get it. Yeah, you know, never thought anything about it. And it came up again, maybe 2 or 3 months later. And so we put things, after it came up again, and I told him, yeah, you know, and he said, well, so we got a lawyer, and he started putting things through in motion. And so I end up, in 1973, latter part of 1973 there, that went into ownership of the place. And I kept working at the plant because my knowledge of, as far as business was concerned, you know, I just didn't have it there. I said, well, if I get out there and work hard, because I had done that all my life, and work hard, then hey, you know, you can accomplish things. But it was so much more involved in that. A lot of politics, you know, being the place of what it was. There was a lot of politics involved. I knew nothing of politics, you know. So.
And so when you started that, what was the business? What did you do?
It was a motel business, it's a restaurant, and a packaged liquor store.
Okay.
Yeah. I had worked in and around a motel because back in the 50s, when I was in school, I worked at Corinth Motel down there, you know.
Sure.
Helping that man. His name was John Anderson. And I had the experience as far as around the motel cleaning up, and it was the financial part of it that I just didn't really know the whole detail about. And then, like you say, the political side of it was kind of, well, I think that was one of the main things.
And how long did you do that?
I was there 5 years.
Okay.
I was there 5 years. I came out of it in 78. I stayed there 5 years. I didn't know how the system operated. That's what I really didn't know. Didn't know how the system operated. And by me not knowing that, that caused me to.
Are you saying you didn't know who you had to be nice to? Is that
Well, that's not so much of that. It was my knowledge of how the system worked.
Okay.
Say, for instance, bookkeeping and stuff like that. Now, I did have people come up and talk to me about it. I had a bookkeeper. But me knowing how I could maybe balance here and balance here, and if I was, that was the whole problem, really, just knowing how to balance my system there.
That it is the opposite of fun, isn't it?
Yes.
So, what did you do next?
After that, I just worked at different places, and I ended up going back to Intex.
Okay.
They hired me back in as a supervisor. having my experience, being there. And I worked there, I guess, for another 20 years, I think.
Wow.
As a supervisor.
And then retired from there?
Yes.
Tell me about what you're doing now.
What am I doing?
Tell me about this and what you do.
Well, when it first started, we started, I don't know, about 4 or 5 years ago, I guess, when we first had an idea. We were sitting down talking at the Black History Museum down there. Ms. Miller and a few others. And we were sitting there and she was saying, well, it would be so nice if when they close that building down that we could get it and start a community center or something like that. Maybe move the Black History Museum into it, something like that.
Sure. And
that's how it started. And they worked for a couple of years and really never got it off its feet. We would just brainstorming here, brainstorming there, but it was never anything done until they asked Mr. Creighton to come in and be the chairman.
Okay.
And he started things moving. And so I heard about that. I don't know if somebody didn't call me or he called me or somebody and asked me if I wanted to get on board.
You're a volunteer here?
Yes, I've been volunteering here. And so that was a great idea because it would be just wonderful if we could do this.
Sure.
And so I just got in and put in 110, 15%, whatever I had to, because I had retired and all my time was my time, basically.
Is the target audience for this mostly young people, old people, everybody?
Right now we're having problems, I think, getting the younger generation involved. Most of the people, I think, just the elder and the older people that is more of a participation right now. It's just kind of hard to get the young people on board, yes, because see, they don't want to, if they ain't going to work, they got to have some money, And it's one of our problems now. We're talking to different people and trying different things to try to get them on board.
How would you describe it? I mean, it's an activities center sort of thing. What would people come here for? And
we did things like have dances on certain occasions, like holidays, do that to try to raise money. We also started a hot meals program, which is, we do 5 days a week for the seniors, the people that can't repair their own, fix their own dinner or supper or something like that.
Sure.
And we have that program going, and we have other programs that we would like to get started, but we just hadn't got it. We're limited with funds. That's one of the things and we are having a community dinner, what I guess you would say on November, on the first of each month, first Sunday in each month, that we come in and cook dinner and have the community. We got involved with the churches and asked them, and we brainstormed that, and someone came up with the idea of doing this, and it has been good for us.
Now, are you still active with the Black History Museum?
Yes, I am.
Okay. I have some kind of naive outsider questions for you, if it's okay.
Okay.
Your generation, which is my generation,
yes,
lived here. You lived here in a very segregated world.
Yes.
You went to segregated schools, the whole period of school.
Yes.
Lived in a segregated community. Younger people today, if that's discussed, how is that understood?
Well, I'm going to say that some that Well, let me give this a second here, and I don't want to misrepresent anything. I think why they see it different is because they came up in a different generation. And the generations changed. Now, my idea of what they are doing now, they're not taking advantage being a black person. They're not taking advantage of that situation. See, and it might be because they don't know what my generation went through to try to get to a certain point, to get them where they are now, that they failed to see this. And I think my generation wanting them to do more, take more advantage of it, and they failed to do that, take advantage of, like, see, when I got in at the plant, that was the best thing in the world for me.
Sure.
See, and I tried to give mine the advantages to go to school that I never had. And a lot of the young kids now, and I think every year, the foundation that they're setting for their children, most of them, I'm gonna say a majority, they're not setting a good foundation.
Okay.
And this is why the kids are not taking this serious. You can't take a 3-year-old child and just laugh at things he do. You got to train him from the time he start understanding, or when you make him understand the things that he should know and should not do, and things like that. Because you can't wait and start training when you get 10 or 12. They don't know how to parent their children. That's one of the things, and this is one of the things that we're looking at here. It's not the children that we need to get to, it's that seem like lost generation in between there that needs to be on the right track. I hope I answered your question.
You did. Well, looking back on that time now, how do you feel about that? I mean, is there still anger about what it was like here in the 1950s and 60s? Well,
I think what I feel is the only thing.
Sure.
You can't say that you'll always remember certain things, but if you're going to look at the big picture, you can't hold on to that. I look at it today, if you treat me as a man, I'll treat you the same. See? And that's the only way. You can't hold those things back, but you can never forget them. But you have to let them go to a degree to move ahead.
When you were a relatively young man, there was a great deal of disturbance here in the state of Mississippi, certainly Medgar Evers and the integration of the University of Ole Miss. Do you remember much of that related to here in Corinth? Was that further south?
We did have a few marches, but it was nothing on this end like it was farther south. And who I give the credit for there, I think, is our leaders. Now, I'll have to look at our principal at that time, Mr. Bishop. Mr. Bishop was, I don't know how he was an extraordinary man. He was a communicator. If you sit and listen to him, he could talk you into anything, and he made sense. See, that's it. If you sit down and listen to him, he could convince you that he was right, and he could show that to you.
he was a school board chairman or something?
Well, actually, he was principal. They didn't want him to be superintendent. They had a system here one time. If you were the oldest principal, then you could be superintendent. They didn't want a black as superintendent. So they changed the system then when they integrated. They made him Title 1 program, the Title 1 program. And he was a lobbyist, what a lot of the young people didn't know all over around Corinth, that he was one of the lobbyists from Alcorn County. If they wanted money, they sent Mr. Bishop.
And he ultimately got elected mayor.
Yes, he ran for alderman. The first time he ran, he lost. And then he came back and won. And I think in doing that time, I don't know, it was his second term, I think, we had problems in the mayor's office. And they made him mayor pro tem or something and he held that position until next election. He ran and he won it, and he stayed there until I think
he won.
Yes.
Essentially re-election.
Yes.
In a mostly white town.
Yes. Okay. See, I think the generation of white that when he was in there, they didn't know that they were just coming into the political field.
Okay.
They didn't know how the things that he had done for Alcorn County as far as lobbying. Because I think back when John D. Messier was mayor is when he started doing this. And there was a story in which I find it was true, like when he came here in 1936, sometime between 36 and I'm gonna say 44 or 45, and they had the Scale Street building up there.
Okay.
He needed furniture for 2 rooms and library furniture. And the way they did it then, they would order the high school and you would get the old furniture and they would get the new furniture.
Wonderful.
But he came in and so what he did, he got a requisition and made it out and sent it to the state of Mississippi. To Scale Street Elementary and Scale Street High School or whatever. And months later, here come the furniture to Scale Street, and they sent the bill to the high school. And boy, there was a big rigmarole there, but hey, what could you do? And it specified where the furniture should go.
He must have been a very persuasive man.
He was a very intelligent, smart, and persuasive person. Yeah. So that kind of really.
And this is obviously a very difficult question. How would you describe race relationships here in Corinth now? How do you feel about it?
Well, I'm gonna say that the relationship, far as what you can see, is good.
Okay.
I'm gonna say that some of the same things happen that, not to a degree, some of the same things that are happening back is happening now, but maybe they just do it in a little different way of doing it.
Okay.
Yeah.
But still somewhat exists.
It's still, but overall, yeah, people are a little more intelligent about that, and then it have to probably be specific things that if you got a complaint that you could complain about, because you're going to school, the same place, and if you don't get what you're supposed to get when you go, then basically whose fault is it?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's going to be your parents' fault.
I tend to think so, yes.
Yeah.
you.
See, and that's what I was talking about, you know, when parents send you to school, that's who you need to talk to get your kids straightened out. You know, people say, well, so-and-so is my role model, but your biggest role model is your parent.
Hopefully.
I don't care if they had a master's degree or didn't have a degree at all. Because see, if a child see his parent doing something, he figures it's okay for him to do it.
Sure.
So your parent is your biggest role model. You know, that's mine. That's what I think. Now you might want to be like somebody else, but your parents is your role model.
And you never left here, did you? You never moved away from Corinth?
No, I never moved away.
Never worked on a farm?
Oh, yes, now. I started on the farms.
You might be the only person I've talked to that hadn't worked on a farm.
But up until I was, when my father moved to Oxford to pastor that church, we worked on the farm.
Okay.
From as old as I can remember, you know, like 4 or 5, we worked at the house. I remember my mom, you talk about these people going to school, being psychiatrists and knowing all this. My mom, she could outdo any of them. Because when we got old enough to carry a stick of wood, you know, stove wood, you know, she would start us then. We'd have on diapers. She'd say, "Oh, baby, take the stick." You carry it in the house, you think you're doing a big deal. You get a little bigger, she'd put another one in your arm. See, and then the next you get a little bigger, she put 3 in there. When you get about 5 years old, that was your job.
Okay.
And you can't say you didn't know how to do it. That was your job, and you had to do it. Then they made the rule. So, you know, and that's what parents did back then, because they had to.
Sure.
Yeah. They trained you how to do things. They taught you how to get along in life. They taught you what the systems were and how things were in the streets and that. So you learn how to avoid certain issues because you were taught that.
Including racial issues?
Yes. Say, for instance, if I was going down the street and I was on the same side that you had a group of white guys down on the corner, I cross over the street to the other side because you know what they're going to do. Or they're going to call you the N-word. So why walk down in the middle of them when you can go over? Not that you're afraid, but that's the wise thing to do. You can't lose. You can't win if you go down there and get in the middle of them. They're going to push you. They're going to do something to you. So if you cross over the street and you can go on. See, and this is just forethought. You were taught this because you can't win the system. If something happened, police come, it's going to take you to jail. See, so we were taught all this. Kids now that come up, they're not taught anything. Basically, if they are real young, and they grow up with a chip on their shoulder too. See, say the man's holding me down. If you want to be something, it's all up here. You might have to take a little abuse, verbal abuse, but if you really want to do it, and you're programmed here to do it, and you're going to do what you have to do this, to accomplish, you have to set yourself a goal.
Sure.
And you can reach it.
Are you optimistic about this project here?
Yes.
Good.
Oh man, I believe it's going to happen. That's how optimistic I am.
It's an optimistic approach.
Yes.
That's a good thing.
It's going to happen. It's going to happen. See, we're making small steps. As long as they are moving forward, you're moving ahead. And then you got a better foundation as you move ahead. But when you move fast, sometimes you misrepresent what you have. So if you make small steps, then you got a better foundation because there.
Would you mind if I turn the recorder off?
You can cut it off, yes.
I really appreciate
Thank
your
you.
time. And let me, again, thank you. Let me turn it off.
Okay.